By May 1945, the major cities of Europe had been reduced to concrete and ash. Tens of millions of lives were lost, and entire nations were shattered. We study this period not to celebrate the figures involved, but to trace exactly how extremist ideologies take root and what happens when they are allowed to flourish. At the center of this destruction was Adolf Hitler. As the leader of the Nazi Party, he engineered a regime that held absolute control over the German state. His path from a failed artist to a dictator demonstrates how democratic institutions can be dismantled from within when ambition is combined with organized hatred and relentless propaganda. Born in Austria-Hungary in 1889, Hitler grew up clashing with his strict father. While his father demanded he pursue a career as a government official, Hitler wanted to draw buildings and landscapes. In 1907, he moved to Vienna to pursue that ambition. The Vienna Academy of Fine Arts rejected his application, concluding his drawings lacked the required artistic ability. Following his mother's death from breast cancer that same year, his funds dried up. He spent the next several years drifting through homeless shelters and cheap hostels, surviving by selling small painted postcards to tourists. During these years of poverty, he consumed countless political books and newspapers. Vienna was a highly diverse city, and historians point to this period as the time he began absorbing the anti-scientific, extremist conspiracy theories that would later define his politics. When World War I broke out in 1914, he volunteered for the German army. He served primarily as a messenger on the Western Front, where he was wounded and ultimately awarded the Iron Cross for bravery. Germany's defeat in 1918 shocked him. Refusing to accept a military loss, he embraced a false narrative spreading through Germany, the lie that the army had been betrayed from the inside by its own politicians. His early personal failures, the trauma of the trenches, and these fabricated betrayal myths cemented a rigid, nationalist worldview ready to be weaponized. After the war, the new Weimar Republic struggled to survive. The Treaty of Versailles imposed severe economic penalties on Germany, leading to financial hardship and widespread national humiliation. In 1919, Hitler joined a small, fringe political group called the German Workers' Party. He quickly discovered that his intense, aggressive public speaking was highly effective at drawing crowds and directing their anger. He attempted to seize control directly in 1923 through a violent coup in Munich. The beer hall push failed and landed him in prison, but the subsequent trial gave him a national platform to broadcast his ideology. While imprisoned, he realized that violent revolution was ineffective. Upon release, he shifted his strategy, deciding to pursue power legally by competing in democratic elections. The catalyst for his political rise arrived in 1929. The Great Depression triggered a global economic collapse, causing mass unemployment in Germany and leaving voters desperate for radical solutions. This chart visualizes that correlation perfectly. As the blue line shows unemployment spiking between 1929 and 1932, the red line, representing the percentage of Nazi electoral votes, rises right alongside it. Capitalizing on this electoral momentum, Hitler was legally appointed Chancellor in January 1933 by President Paul von Hindenburg, operating under the rules of the existing Democratic Republic. Within months, the new government began arresting political opponents and restricting civil liberties. Following Hindenburg's death in 1934, Hitler merged the roles of president and chancellor into a single office, declaring himself Führer. Germany's democracy was not conquered from the outside. It was systematically dismantled from within, utilizing the laws designed to protect it by exploiting a society broken by economic crisis. With absolute control secured, the state weaponized his prejudices into law. In 1935, the regime introduced the Nuremberg Laws, officially stripping many German Jews of their citizenship and basic human rights. Simultaneously, the government began an aggressive expansion of its military production. This was driven by his doctrine that Germany required additional territory or living space through conquest. That military buildup culminated on September 1, 1939. German forces invaded Poland, prompting Britain and France to declare war and initiating the Second World War. His armies quickly occupied much of Europe before launching Operation Barbarossa in 1941, a massive invasion of the Soviet Union that would eventually become a catastrophic military failure for Germany. Under the cover of this global conflict, the regime carried out the Holocaust. The state built a vast infrastructure dedicated to the systematic murder of approximately 6 million Jews. This machinery of death targeted and eliminated millions of others, including Romani people, individuals with disabilities, Soviet prisoners of war, LGBTQ individuals, and political opponents. These atrocities were not collateral damage or an unintended byproduct of combat. They were the deliberate, executed goals of his racial ideology. By 1944, the military situation was collapsing. The endless casualties fractured internal loyalty, leading a group of German officers to attempt an assassination on July 20th. The plot failed. By early 1945, the strategic reality was entirely hopeless. German forces were being crushed between the Allies advancing from the west and the Soviets arriving from the east. While Soviet forces surrounded Berlin, Hitler spent his final days isolated beneath the city in the Führer bunker, detached from the devastation occurring above ground. On April 29th, he married his longtime companion, Eva Braun. The following day, as defeat became absolute, they both died by suicide, and their staff burned their remains according to his instructions. His absolute refusal to surrender until his own death ensured that the nation he had promised to elevate was instead left in total ruin. Any short-term economic gains or infrastructure projects constructed in the early years of his rule are permanently tied to the widespread repression and the staggering loss of human life that followed. He received no internationally respected awards for his leadership. He exists in the historical record entirely as an architect of crimes against humanity. Today, society actively memorializes the victims of his regime. These monuments serve as permanent physical reminders of where hatred and intolerance ultimately lead. Understanding this history is a requirement for maintaining a free society. It provides a clear blueprint, teaching future generations exactly how to recognize and reject the mechanisms of tyranny before they can take root again.